everyone, welcome back. This is Seth Casposa, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame Healing Arts and Cult Science. It's been a while since I've had anyone on in terms of certain things that have been developed on this end. And once again, bringing on Thomas Sheridan in order to clarify a lot of different discrepancies that I feel with all of this are definitely going to have their confirmations. It's to note that those of us that are here, especially men that know the difference in terms of how things actually work, I'm going to encourage everybody out there to listen in to this segment, because in light of the procession and everything that has taken place in the reality field leading up to the present moment, everything we're about to get into is to set the record straight when it comes to that, and also what we need to get back to in terms of our focus when it comes to path work, when it comes to connection, when it comes to all of these things that have put the entire fucking reality field in the place of quote-unquote distancing itself unto itself. So again, Thomas, or should I call you Wallace? This painting of William Wallace definitely looks like a spitting image of you. Also to the heart, the brave heart, all of this in terms of what this goes back to. Thomas, it's good to have you on. How do you want to start diving into things here?
Same thing. I feel the same way about it. The world is a very strange place to me right now. I can see the fracturing. There's definitely a sense of if someone's put a spoon into a pot of boiling water and stirred it, it hasn't settled down yet. It's still spinning. And it's also a time that in terms of people doing magic and stuff like that, I think they need to be really careful.
In what terms? What do you mean?
In terms that the fact I really do believe reality is divided in two right now, and what may have worked in a ritual not be effective in this current thing. The way I see it, this whole COVID thing has become a kind of god of its own. A lot of psychic energy is directed towards it, just the most screwed up, fucked up thing ever. And what may work previously in one form of reality not work, maybe volatile right now, on some really weird things have been happening. Reality is shifting. So
it goes back to some things that I've mentioned, that all of these old systems that came out, the desert lands, they're not going to work for what's coming.
No, not at all.
And things hit like I warned about. I warned about 2020 over 5 years ago, and then even a few months prior. Never could have fucking imagined what actually fucking unfolded. And in terms of things that have come to me, it goes back to a very, very ancient spellcast that was designed to go off when it did, to basically attempt to slam the gates in terms of the procession and the thresholds that were meant to be crossing. Came out with the lockdown bullshit. And I've been exposing that equation for fucking years, teaching people how to dismantle that. Very fucking ironic to me, because I know the game, I know what's been going on, I can see everything clearly for what the fuck it is. And then you're coming out recently speaking about how the energy of Bolton is back. And I had been in space doing certain things in terms of the grid works and the geography of the lands here, crying out to the ancestors in terms of release. And basically petitioning as far as the split, because this shit's fucking bullshit, man. It all goes back to this landmine that was essentially meant to go off when it fucking did. And so 2020, I also heard it said years prior that was the real 2012.
Big time, yeah. I've heard that, and I believed it too when I heard it.
So things in terms of timelines, they've been fucking skewed in all of this old shit, trying to keep things locked down so that these thresholds aren't crossed. And as far as what I'm observing and what I've seen happen, this algorithm amplifying whatever the fuck has not been fucking dealt with up to this point, and then triangulating and locking it down into that in terms of consciousness.
That's why they're also even going after people's DNA. These ancestral codes are wired into the DNA. They're in there. That's where the actual recording mechanism is. And that's why this fucking just basically to get in there. There's definitely a seismic shift happening in humanity that probably hasn't happened, I don't know, for maybe 5,500 years ago, when humans stepped into the present level of consciousness, and we're back here again. And they don't want it to happen because they got so much vested interest in keeping us where they had us, that they don't want to lose it.
With things in context to the procession, in terms of the rise of the energy of Wotan, Odin. There's a discrepancy to the mythos and all of this occult history going back to cults in the desert lands and all the stuff that came out of the Sumerian Draconian Empire.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on this because I don't agree to the idea that anything in terms of the ancestors here in context has anything to fucking do with that shit.
If it did, it would have to do it as a force outside it, to interfere with it. So that's why I think this Votanic energy that's rising. Look at it this way. Anytime there was the wild hunt, Carl Jung pointed that out in both of them.
Right.
And the wild hunt is the ones who don't get out of the way of Wotan charging down from the north are the ones who get slain. So this is why it's not fate. You have a choice if you want to stand in front of him, in front of the wild hunt, or stand out of the way. And you're given fair warning to stand out of the way. And what happens is people, by their nature, the majority of them, don't heed this and they stand in the way. And that's not so much that the gods are trying to protect us by getting involved in defending us or anything like that. The smarter ones get out of the way. So while the energy involved has nothing to do with originating from them, it launches these energies, it brings them forward. When people become weak and become cowardly, that's when the Votanic energy from the north comes down. And it's happening right now to remove the profane during the wild hunt. I completely believe that's what's happening right now. Right. But it's not coming down to save us. The gods don't work that way. It's an opportunity that's given to reality to get the ones who can think for themselves a piece of space to step aside.
Right. Okay. So you being an occult scholar, to the idea that anything in terms of the mythos and the ancestors and all of this has anything to do with the fallen Anu in context to Draconians, reptilians, Greys, all these different alien factions and sectoids, any of that?
God, no, not at all. The Anunnaki thing is part of that whole salvation psychomus thing, that there's some kind of space gods are going to come and save us. That's what that's all rooted in. A belief that, a very dangerous and negative belief, that they created us somehow, that we are a product of them, that we were made by them. And this is a very disempowering thing for human beings to get involved in, extremely profane. It's surrendering your fate, surrendering your destiny to an outside force. One of the most ridiculous things has been elevated into this enormous thing.
It all goes back to these inverted Saturnian constructs.
How do you mean?
They worship the inverted energies of Saturn.
Like the Sabbatean cults of the...
Right. The constructs in terms of transits and all of this Plutonian energy transiting Capricorn right now,
yep,
is pressed up, eroding all of these inverted constructs and grid works that have been laced the fuck out. And then what they did was lace out another one in turn. And if people can't see the fucking fact that mind control is a very real thing, then you're fucking retarded.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's made very clear to me in terms of the ancestors and every race bloodline having to deal with this other force that has come through. And so the awakening of the ancestors, I don't care what your blood codes are, it's happening with everybody. That's what they don't want to fucking activate. This is the release of all of the old fucking cycles and timelines that they're trying to keep the reality field locked down into on an unconscious level in terms of trance. And it's all fear-based bullshit working to amplify whatever the fuck is there on an unconscious level in terms of this algorithm. The skewers and the whole concept of being in the position to create the new mythos. It's the release of all of this old stuff. And I remember in terms of my personal experience when the ancestors came to me and said, they are waiting for us to catch this.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not calling upon the gods or worshiping them or making sacrifice to them. All this shit that happened in terms of these desert cults fucking infiltrating and subverting and taking out all the fucking shaman lines, collecting the fucking knowledge, inverting it, and then using it against us. It's nothing to do with this force that did obviously come in to fuck shit up. And as far as I'm concerned, they don't have jurisdiction, like I've been saying, but that force fears not only the Plutonian energy, but contrast in terms of every race, tribe, and culture.
Yeah, well, that's why they locked down the whole planet. You know, they didn't just lock down one area, they locked down everywhere. I can't disagree with any of that. I can't disagree.
Right.
What you said feels right. It's self-evident by the state of the planet right now. The state of human consciousness right now, it's self-evident.
It should be self-evident.
Should be.
Right.
To everyone.
So people that we know have been hit coming up against this force.
I know people who are part of the pagans here, and they've ended up completely swallowing the entire narrative, hook, line, and sinker. They were totally, like I said, spellbound. They had no defenses against it, and they fell right into it. And the change was remarkable. They were people who you didn't expect it to happen, and suddenly they became terrorized and fear and tormented, and they collapsed and folded into that inverted Saturn concept as you described it.
The inverted Saturnian energies in terms of planetary consciousness are the absolute most malefic. And see, getting into planetary consciousness, navigating what I term the solar spiral of creation, this is what has to be mastered on a certain level in terms of initiation of what I get into with people. So they recognize not only their own blueprints here, but so that it's not used against you.
Or you are infected by it. That's why we have to maintain, like you're saying, you're basically moving on there. Just like they fear a biological viral infection, people like us have to be very careful of a psychic infection.
Right. So it is the psychic field being fucked with in terms of these forces.
Big time, yeah.
And so people that do work in terms of what they could be picking up on, if they don't know the difference in terms of what we're getting at here, chances are their gifting is being manipulated here in context if they don't understand what we're talking about here. As far as my observations go, it couldn't be more clear to me.
Clarity.
Right. And I think it's important to know the difference because the things that you presented, even what we got into before, it's no fucking joke, man. The birthright, as far as I'm concerned, this is what needs to be reclaimed. So the uprise of the ancestors, again, every race, tribe, and culture needs to recognize the difference because every race, tribe, and culture has been dealing with this shit for way too fucking long. That's what they want to keep in place. But in terms of our birthright, knowing the difference, this is our opportunity because as far as I'm concerned, it was an ultra desperate attempt to do what they fucking did.
Yeah, that's the way it comes across to me too as well. A real last rat backed into a corner response. The level of fear that they put into the masses is a projection of the level of fear they carry inside themselves.
Right. Is their fear of who the fuck we really are. Us remembering, us coming into alignment, us realizing the difference here and taking the opportunity to transmute and alchemize and route this shit the fuck out so that it doesn't have jurisdiction. This knowledge is very important because there's such an attack that is taking place in terms of this force upon the ancestors of every race, tribe, and culture. Their fear of us remembering. And in terms of the Ace of Swords, you mentioned this as well, and energies coming from the Great North. Get into that.
The Ace of Swords is associated with the northern regions, the northern latitudes, the Arctic. The sword is the sword of determination, but also it can be the sword of distortion if it goes wrong. The Ace of Swords card is also a very gender-based card. The readings for women are very different than the readings for men. In the men, the Ace of Swords generally means charge ahead, get it done. When women try to apply that to themselves regarding the Ace of Swords, it usually turns out to be catastrophic. It's usually the worst mistake they could make. So the Ace of Swords is very much a masculine card. And in terms of its present place within this zeitgeist, it's pointing down from the north and carrying this photonic energy. Also, there's a strange magnetic vortex at the top of the North Pole. That's what's going to bring the sword into correction.
The axis of the Earth, in terms of the precession, taking it back to the most recent cataclysm, is when that pole shift happens. So the alignment of the core essence of who we are taken away from the solar north. 3 spirals of creation, right? Take it back to the Triskelion sigil of the Druids. They knew this. And the misalignment that happened tied to when these pieces of shit brought the moon here. I don't want to go way deep into the whole Saturn moon matrix shit, but that all goes back to the inverted Saturnian constructs and then getting into the art and science of astropsychology. What does the moon represent? How our thought and emotion operate, the nervous system itself, right? And all of these things in terms of induction and what has gone out to basically skew how things are being processed, the eclipsed soul spark. This is how they're able to keep the gates shut. So the ignition to the north, going to what you're saying here in the Ace of Swords, is that realignment. And the more people that do this and recognize this, that's how the gates can open. And then you see changes happening in the reality field, even in the universe itself.
Big time, yeah. I like the word you used, ignition. change in reality. It's the Ace of Swords is the one hacking it. And this is why we're seeing crossovers of events. This flux is happening. This rattling is happening. Of course, they're not going to be able to keep control of it. It's cosmic. It's beyond them.
Right. This has been the attempt, as far as what I've seen, to keep that lockdown in place so that all of these old timelines on an unconscious level keep perpetuating themselves. See, there came a point when so much was being revealed and codes being cracked, recognizing the hour that we are actually in. All of the old timeline cycle bullshit going to the fourth veil, as I've explained in Labyrinth of the Nine Veils Part 1, is a threshold that's never been crossed before since what happened did. And so in this attempt to keep the lockdown in place, it pressed up against the core wound of humanity itself and threw that shit into a spin cycle where all of this old stuff was meant to be moved through and transmuted and alchemized, but through this attempt was lockstepped to keep all of those old timeline cycle wounded aspects happening within the collective unconscious, let alone those of us that are actual template holders, so that we do not accomplish what we have actually incarnated for in terms of the procession. This is the goal. This is the achievement. Again, this is the birthright. This is what belongs to us. And we have to claim it in terms of remembering who we are and allow presence of the higher force to be ignited from within the core essence to rout out all of the inversions. Not to assume that we've come into a new cycle in terms, because this has to happen. And until it happens, anybody out there that knows the fucking difference, you need to take the power of what is there within your core essence and strike with the Ace of Swords in alignment with the Solar North, so that in terms of the split, you're not on the wrong side of the equation. We are not one another's enemies here. We have an unseen enemy that must be extracted. So all of that anger and all of that fucking rage that those of us that know the difference feel surging through our bodies on a multidimensional level, you are meant to throw that energy in terms of the Ace of Swords again upon the true enemy here. That is how it is going to heal for good, so that we are able to cross this threshold and claim what truly belongs to us, instead of turning and tearing one another to fucking pieces, directed by the goddamn fucking parasite. Fuck the fucking parasite. What are we to do with the parasite in terms of identity? And see, Thomas, this is why I wanted to bring you on, because of things you were touching upon in terms of what's been revealed to you, confirming I can't wear a fucking mask, and all the mask wearing and the set barriers that people are unwittingly hiding behind, taking part of a dark ritual which strips away your actual fucking identity. That right there goes back to what happened in terms of the procession. So here it's all up for fucking review. Your templating, your true essence, who you truly are, belongs to you. And the alignment and the connections is what they don't want to happen. Let's make the decision. No matter how afraid we are to face that pain, and let that shit the fuck go. First of all, life is too short here. And again, we did not incarnate to be slaves. We did not incarnate to be living in fear and torment and suffering. We came here to fucking win. 15th round, skin is cut, blood is dripping. You're gassing the fuck out. And see, it's the true heart that is revealed in times like this. It's those that have heart and those that allow the ignition to take place and allow their inner power to ignite. One of the techniques that you need to utilize, everybody, make them think you're weak where you're strong and you're strong where you're weak. Strategy. And I have a specific strategy that all of this is not going to see what is coming, because I won't allow it to fail. And I'm sure as fuck not going to allow anyone that knows the difference to fucking fail. We don't quit. We don't give up. All of this dark shit coming out of the desert lands and what caused the desert lands to be created. If you look at the desert lands on the earth, they're all along the same parallel, right?
Yep.
And it's been confirmed, things that I've revealed going back to Sakura, this wormhole was essentially, they ripped the fuck open because they were fucking with shit that they shouldn't have, man. And it all goes back to this force that absolutely fucking despises humanity in terms of our jurisdiction here. So things in terms of bloodlines. One thing I wanted to bring up, the lineage of Cain, in terms, if you could touch upon that.
I'd read Holy Blood, Holy Grail years ago, back in the mid-early 90s when it was all the rage. I didn't particularly get the whole ethos of it in terms of what they were saying about a Grail bloodline and it being a bloodline of Jesus. And that didn't feel right to me or anything. About 10 years ago now, I was in Scotland and we went to Roslin Chapel, experienced a sense of evil in that place that I've never experienced any other place on earth. Underneath that altar is something buried underneath it. It's horrific, the energy. That was the family ancestral chapel of the Sinclair family. The Sinclairs were part of the original Crusades to what they call the Holy Land. And something after they conquered Jerusalem, under the Temple Mount, they found something that related back to the Temple of Solomon, which we know was constructed with the help of demons. And it was a great secret. It was an entity of some kind put into Roslin Chapel by the Sinclair family. This is a very strange thing because it was almost like at the beginning of this whole British Israelism, where they were trying to make these islands seem like part of the Holy Land. What better way for them to achieve that than to actually take the power force that was in Jerusalem and bring it all the way over to these islands and put it in a chapel? And it's not really geographic when you think about it. And this entity may have been the one that had been working with Kelly and Dee. This thing, whatever it is, like you said, it has a hatred of humans that's hard to comprehend, but it's a reptilian. What makes it most dangerous is its terror, this force you're talking about.
Right, and this is in terms of that algorithm.
Yeah, it's extremely volatile because like a cobra, it's a calculated risk. No matter how powerful and dangerous its fangs are, it will come forward. You could probably grab it and hold its neck and it won't be able to bite you and kill it. It knows that that one bite is the only shot it's going to get to take you out. And that's why it's filled with terror as much as it's filled with dread for the person that it's staring down. And that's the way it flares itself up. So I think the cobra is actually a very good analogy for this force. It's on the cusp of the attack and its own destruction. That's very much the feeling I get about this situation right now.
Right. And there's a difference between snakes and dragons. I just want to make that very fucking clear as well. And this whole discrepancy in terms of dragon lineage, shit fucking went down. And how things were. Taking it back to even pre-Atlantis and Lemuria, and it's so much history that's there within the Codex and in our fucking blood. And things in context to the 3 spirals of creation and how step-down consciousness actually fucking works. Again, it's pressed up against all of this old timeline bullshit, trying to prevent the ignition of the actual birthright. And then all these landmines start going off, 2020. Some other things I wanted to get into do go back to the mythos and what I'm getting at here in terms of the divine feminine force being targeted and why to the 3 Morganes in context to Golveg.
Yep.
This is what I feel, Thomas, we have always been fucking dealing with.
Well, the Morriganna in the Irish mythological pantheon, the Morrigan is brutal. Again, the gods don't interfere. It doesn't create the actual slaughter. In fact, within the Irish mythological cycle, 2 genocides were overseen by the Morriganna. It's almost like the arbiter. Now, you can see these things as literal, or you can see them the way I'm seeing this whole thing now. This Morriganna is overseeing the present upon the masses, this whole lockdown. Now, in terms of that effect with feminine energy, the spellcasters doing things to corrupt the feminine state. This is to literally nullify the female energy and to snuff it out. Now, what better way to ensure that we don't pass through this gate than to remove the divine feminine by corrupting it, by infusing it with male energy, and to basically remove it, to keep that female energy as hidden as possible in order to prevent the mother of death becoming the mother of rebirth, those of us who are destined to the other side.
Right, and this is why they fear the true power of the divine feminine force. So targeting that, this has already happened. So the concept of tribe and the family units, the power of divine masculine and the power of divine feminine coming together, this is what they don't want to fucking happen.
Yeah.
And so with the Platonian energy coming through, this is why.
They're removing, as you said, the divine male and the divine female energy right out of it. The female grounds the male energy.
Supposed to. In terms of all this fucking shit that's happened that hit the fucking reality field, it's pulled things into inverted energies of the neo-feminist agenda, tied directly to the inverted patriarchy. All this fucking bullshit going out, down with the patriarchy and shit. What the fuck? are you talking about? The universe is patriarchal in nature, but it's also matriarchal. This whole programming of competition, one-upping, and things in terms of hyper-independence coming from a place of woundedness, where this can't even be integrated on the level and power that it's actually there in terms of our birthright. It's actually possible, catching these things and knowing the difference. And so it keeps things locked down in all of these old time loops and time cycles to the energy of the three Morganes and things going back to Golbeg. And one thing I need to address here in terms of any mythos out there, what we're actually working with are principles and fundamentals in terms of archetypal consciousness to the gods, not to be worshipped, not to be bowed down to, but reveal the mechanics of the universe and how things actually work here in context of what we're getting at. And in light of the feminine force being targeted, all goes back to what this is specifically addressing. And the real enemy that we are up against here, which is not one another. And the divide and conquer between men and women, especially men and women that know the difference. This is why, because they don't want that to happen when it's meant to happen. Recognize the difference here. See, in terms of the Nordic tradition and how I've been able to apply it to my personal path work, it's because I have the codes to do so. I'm able to extract the wisdom and proper knowledge from these traditions, from the mythos that reveal the principles and fundamentals in terms of mechanics and symbolism to archetypal consciousness. That's what the mythos is. It's not a belief system. If you don't know the difference, you have to know the difference. But what religion did, what the Dark Ones did, going back to what we were talking about earlier, was assume the symbolism and archetypes in terms of what the fuck came out of the fucking desert. That's the confusion. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the force that came through to circumvent mankind in context of what I'm getting at here. And taking the mechanics, it's revealed there. The ancients knew what happened. And in context of the mythos, who did Odin consult? He consulted a human. Why? Because it's like I said, they're waiting for us. They come to us. We don't go to them. That is how it works. That's how it's always worked. But in terms of the inversion, it got flipped upside down. And so all of the other ways that people have utilized the mythos or any of these other ancient writings streamlines them into grid works of consciousness that are coming straight out of the Metatronics period. I do not work with it like that, and I do not hail the gods. The gods hail me. The gods hail us in context. So in turn, we are in the position now to create a new mythos. And when it comes to my personal path work, I've had to extract certain things in order to be in the position to be able to do that so that this old narrative does not continue to play itself out again and again and again. And womankind, mankind needs to recognize the difference in terms of what our true enemy is here and route it the fuck out and honor the ancestors in terms of blood codes, soul codes, everything. No matter what portion of genetics you have to do this. Otherwise, your mechanics are not going to come online. So whether to the white dragon lineage, the red dragon, the yellow dragon, the black dragon, all of these things that I've addressed here in context to fundamentals and principles and how things actually work, what we are dealing with here is the shadow dragon. Take that to reptilians, take that to draconians, take that to insectoids, not to the ancestors. These things did not just come out of nowhere, and humanity has always existed. We are going to continue to exist. This is why we are here, and anybody that knows the difference in terms of what I presented, the pathwork of Odin, in context to pulling things into alignment and training yourself how to master being human. It reveals the true identity. It shows you, and is also connected in context to the mythos to many other arts and sciences that are out there. I have the gift of being able to see how it all pieces together. And so to whatever discrepancies people assume in terms of what this platform actually represents goes into that which is even more ancient. Do not assume that Black Earth Productions has anything to do with the glorification of the Nordic tradition, because it doesn't. In terms of what I really practice and what's there within the templating is far greater and far beyond all this. That's the point of what I'm working to address here. I just went off on a rant, Thomas.
what you said there was beautiful. It's just that there's no other way to describe it. I totally agree.
We're going to come back after the break here and dive deeper into what all of this means. This is Seth Esposa, Black Earth Productions. Me and Thomas will be back after the break.
Would you work like a willful captive? Link by link as the life is passing. Self-imposed with an iron tread. No consolation overhead. Sharpened steel gleams. Choices made. The edge cuts clean. From the blade, the sand is down to its final grain. With every crowd comes a guillotine. This one thing you cannot do. When the blade drops, your world is split in two. You can do to stop it. Drop the blade. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Drop the blade. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Drop it! The sand is down to its final grain. With every crowd comes a guillotine. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Drop the blade. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Drop it.
And we are back. This is Seth Esposa, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame, Healing Arts, and Occult Science, here with Thomas Sheridan. The lyrics to that song are timely to what you were getting at in terms of the Ace of Swords.
How does an electric current flow? Negative and positive, the duality. If they can cause a disruption in the male and female, then they stop the flow of the energy down here on this reality. It's that simple for them. Right. All they have to do is cut off that flow of current.
The splitting away of the blade that is coming through from the north needs to be slammed the fuck down upon the parasite. Period. Again, they cannot stop what is coming. So what are we going to decide in terms of what we are going to assume here? If the new mythos is to be created, then the release of the ancestors needs to take place. The release of all these old timelines, the release of all this old narrative that keeps the reality field locked the fuck down. No new timeline has been determined yet. Why? Because there's those of us that know the difference and those that are here to route this shit the fuck out and assume your true power and your true identity and the alignment of what is there within your core essence. All of the fear that we experience in terms of this is the fear of the dark ones, is the fear of the parasite about to lose its fucking host. In extreme cases, this can go into many things, but whatever the fucking case, they cannot stop the procession. They cannot stop things in alignment in terms of that soul spark ignition happening. So whatever seals are there blocking this, it's a fucking lie. In terms of focus, when it comes back to everything, we cannot be giving our focus to any of this. We need to focus on what is truly there. seeing past everything, seeing it for what it is. This is how it happens in the activations in terms of codex. That they're taking it back to the original in terms of the procession so that we can catch up to soul cycles and come back on to the original timeline that we are meant to be on. And the crowning of what all that means in terms of COVID and all this shit, it's the dark crown that needs to have that guillotine drop the fuck down on it. This is where we decide, no matter what we're dealing with, no matter what we're feeling, no matter what the circumstances are, and so that all the half-truths can be reconciled, so that things can be brought back even stronger and better than they were before. Got the wolf shield up, and another symbol that I use that if you don't know what it means, then don't assume that it's anything else to do with anything except fundamentals and principles to symbolism explaining what is really going on here. The language of symbolism is 101. And if you don't know the difference here, then a lot of things can be skewed. There's a lot of cross-streaming and assumptions that can take place. And that's why you got to take time to know the difference and actually consider these things, because the way I work with symbolism here is not the same as most people out there. The gods are waiting for us. They are looking to us, period. We are the ones that are at the spearhead of evolution here. What we decide, assuming the archetype within the fulcrum, that's another technique. And I'm not going to go way into that. I just wanted to make that very clear for anybody out there listening. You do not want to insult the gods. You don't want to go out of your way to insult the ancestors of any bloodline. That is what the Dark Ones want, so that we don't assume unity consciousness, especially in terms of what I'm getting at when it comes to the divine masculine and the divine feminine templating. These are things that we are allowed to work with in order to catch up the soul cycles and bring things back onto the potential original timeline so that we can continue and we get out of this triangulated lockdown to the procession going back 26,000 to 50,000 years. There was legacy being forged at one time. And in terms of the fourth veil and what we are working to move through and release, this is what the fuck they want to keep us in, so that we turn and tear one another to pieces and all this old shit going back to the first wars and what it was over. Remember who you are, O masculine. Remember who you are, O feminine. For it is us here in Midgard, here on Earth, that are that spirit of evolution. Ride the spear, ride the wind, just as Sagittarius pulls back its bow and releases the arrow towards the central sun for ignition, and thereby cracking open the gates of wisdom. This is the path. It's all connected. It's just one way of explaining it. There's many different ways of explaining it. And the ancients knew not to distortions and overlays and crossovers or whatever the fuck. I'm talking about the real here. Fundamentals, principles, mechanics, how things actually work. This is what it all comes back to, here in context. And like it says in the ancient writings, those that have the eyes to see and the ears to hear are going to see and know. They will be able to extract from the codex and as a part of the birthright so that the new mythos can be created. This had to be revealed and moved out of the way before that could take place in terms of the procession and progression rate that has been taking place. The old ones, which is this interdimensional thought form parasite. Take it back to H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, right? What the fuck was that guy looking at? This, as far as I'm concerned, is what he was tapping into, man. So the whole concept of a virus, these beings or whatever the fuck they are, they're microscopic, but at the same time, in terms of grid works, have been able to lace themselves the fuck out in terms of consciousness because of how undetectable it actually fucking is, as far as I'm concerned.
Those of you who are interested in H.P. Lovecraft's work, which you all should be, that 90-minute or so full-length feature film documentary on the Beyond Room 313 channel, my insight into the work of H.P. Lovecraft, particularly from an occultic point of view. Now, this is very serious stuff now. Just because something doesn't exist in your material framework doesn't mean that it is not true. And just because I name an entity or something like that, I just know that it's an energy force that is encapsulated in forms that suits it in order to harvest energy of human beings. So let's take it at that. Now, you've heard me talk for a long time now about, I will not name the name of this one,
If you want to know more about this, there is a link down below to a broadcast I did that's gone down kind of like legendary in history. I'm not afraid of it. I'm wary of it. We're now entering the age where it has taken stewardship mainly through media. Now, media is the ideal place for it. And in many ways, if there's a spiritual war going on today, it's the war between people like us who are pagans and animists against these entities and other ones out there, including Jehovah, who are impacting upon the happiness and the success of the human evolution and development, both psychological, psychic, and physical. The babbler in the abyss. In, say, things like smear campaigns, he did this, he did that, babble, 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 and that's it. You see someone running a smear campaign and you are seeing an infected individual being controlled by a demon, attacking people. The psychic firewall is so destroyed they're easily got into. The babbler in the abyss. Probably the most powerful entity. We live in an age where the electromagnetic spectrum is widening significantly, as is genetics, and I'll talk about the genetic aspect later on. The electromagnetic spectrum has now moved beyond the concept of electrons moving through a conductive material such as a wire and electronic component and so on. And by means of quantum computing is now doing calculations off planet. And by off planet, I mean in another dimension. And no matter what you read in Wired magazines or Forbes or any mainstream journals, just like AI, quantum computing is not very good at the moment. It's really not. It's a leap in the dark. And what these scientists are discovering is magic. That's what they're discovering. They're discovering magic. This is what I'm talking about. Magic is science. This is what it is. Now, the way to describe this, and also a good analogy for things like chaos, is imagine you have to transverse an area filled with snakes, all kinds of diseases, all kinds of bacterial issues, hostile other forces. Well, the same thing applies to this quantum computing. When you throw the calculations off into off-world realms or the dimensions, the calculation going there and coming back is going through hostile territory. By hostile territory, I mean the entities and the energy forces that we call angels impacting upon that information on its way there and on its way back. The babbler in the abyss attained psycho-spiritual and psychological stewardship over the unknown domain. The babbler in the abyss. And this is when you notice the infection when it comes into that. Things in life are very simple. Something either is or something either isn't true. Now, there are areas of modulation of effect and causality that may be between them, but the ultimate end product, you saw the other video I made on the feedback loop in terms of how the functionality of the process. What happens in a situation like this is you have an eternal middle period. And the eternal middle period is just confusion and nothing seems to ever get solved. The process is not completed because there's no focus, because everything is a containment, a quantum entanglement in between. Any kind of curse or anything. So basically the same idea. If you're trying to work a process in the quantum world via a development, a calculation, or anything in our five-sense reality world, as you pull the seesaw down, there could be things in the middle that will roll to you. Within that point of flux, you have quantum entanglement in the world of biotech as well.
This is why I advocate the practice in terms of what Drawing the Circle of Magician is really all about. It is all about fortifying your field in terms of sound, consciousness, energy, frequency, and vibration so that you do not get quantumly entangled into all of this lower astral sub-realm shit that is directly connected to the Metatronics in context of what Thomas is getting at. And I have to mention this here because this is what the fuck, again, they took out of the equation. And the manipulation, again, going back to how the circle has been utilized and inverted. There's a lot of different psychic defense systems out there, but none so effective as what I know works here in terms of what I've taught and those that have effectively applied it to their existence, knowing how to fortify their field, knowing how to discern, knowing how to gauge energies correctly. This is where we take it back to the original. Knowing the fact here in terms of what is being shared, that the quantum and psychic field has been manipulated. So again, individuals out there that have gifts need to be able to discern whether or not you're actually tapping into grid works of consciousness that are beyond everything that's been laced out here in terms, or if you're caught in all the nets, traps, and snares and the labyrinth like I've talked about over the years. I know the fucking difference in terms. I know what I'm talking about. Thomas knows what he's talking about. And if all of these scientists are rediscovering magics, don't you see what is happening here, everybody? It's as I said, I am taking things back to the original teaching. These scientists are not sages. They are not shamans. They are not authentic witches connected to the laws of nature in the universe. This is what they don't want us to remember. And so in turn, what is taking place? The entanglement, which is the cause point for triangulation with the binary code, inverting and concealing the access to Gununga Gap, which is the circle in alignment with the wand of fire and the spindle of the energy force itself. This is what everything in reality is pressed up against. What do you think the lockdown is? I didn't just incarnate. Thomas didn't just incarnate. Other people out there just didn't incarnate to allow this bullshit to fucking continue. And those that don't know the difference, we are part of a world within this one that reaches far past anything that we're even talking about. So again, I'm going to advocate the teaching in terms of the circle and utilize it, especially those that have been initiated, those that have known me for years, so that we can untangle this bullshit. If you are not able to hear and feel and sense, there is nothing else to say in terms. This is what it all boils down to since I started presenting things. Fuck about the babbler of the abyss. What do we declare? What do we speak forth in terms of our evocations? Not going to be controlled by some kind of fucking AI bullshit through the abbreviation AI. Angelic intelligence, everybody. How many of you have actually studied the greater and lesser key of Solomon? What do you think it all goes back to? Like I've stated, Sumerian Draconian. This is where angels come from. The angles of geometric structures that harvest sound, consciousness, energy, frequency, and vibration into these specific grid works in terms of the lockdown equation. This is why we had to scream across the fucking abyss, seal off the rift, build the bridge. We are standing at the gates in terms of the procession. Thomas, continue.
Yeah, you have a combination where we have new norms that can develop, coupled with quantum computing, bring Lovecraftian entities into existence in real life. And this is why I believe that Lovecraft was the pagan shaman who compensate other kinds of entities. If my work is remembered for anything, I hope it's remembered for this. Stewardship of the consciousness. It's about stewardship of the consciousness. So, mark my words, the potential for the reality of so many people to be literally turned inside out. Should you be worried about this? Only if you're watching this video and going, oh, this is such bullshit. Yeah, you're fucked. That article has been singled out by the AI because it doesn't want the information out there. I invoke Odin, I invoke Freya, and not make this happen. People are working on the forefront of quantum computing. They'll be quantum entangled. They think that everything is science, even though they're working in the world of magic. And that, my friends, is how chaos magic works. There's the unseen dangers are also the unseen opportunities.
And in Lovecraft stories, it's never the entities that kill the humans in the story. It's their own fear. Lovecraft had that response beautifully thought out.
This is what the fuck we're up against. We're not each other's fucking enemies here.
No, but how does an electric current flow, negative and positive? If they can cause a disruption in the male and female, then they stop the flow of the energy down here on this reality. It's that simple for them. Right. All they have to do is cut off that flow of current.
Right, and this is what I've explained in terms of how the manipulation of the wand of fire fucking happens, the positive and negative charge. In context to the illusion of duality, where in terms of mathematics and all of these different constructs, they threw 0 up in front of 1 in terms of the binary code.
Yeah.
Because most people, they're not having these sorts of conversations. And this is why I wanted to hit you up and get your take on all of this in terms, man, because as far as I'm concerned, we're closer than we've ever been. But this is the crux. And I think it always has been a false gatekeeper of the 10th ether.
Yeah, to try and dissipate as many souls as possible on the threshold so we don't pass through. So, as individuals trying to pass through the other side without being dissipated on the threshold, the thing is to not get sucked into the fear, to be aware of it, but not to have fixity of purpose connected to it. The most important one is to understand, and this is the hardest one for people to deal with, is to understand that everybody's opinion in this current situation is a product of free will. And even when you can say things like, oh, well, some people are terrified at the moment because of the non-stop propaganda to make them terrified, to lock them down. But that's still a choice. Everything is a choice. Is that even when you don't make a choice, you've made a choice. So this is when you have to understand that you cannot waste your psychic energy. Your job is for you to get yourself through. The Pathfinders, the first ones that got there, created a situation on the other side to allow others to pass through.
Right.
If everyone is in a fear-based zone and are giving off negative energy vibes, and you're not, you seem in control, you know what you're doing, you've already more or less crossed over. The ones who have the ability to see this will emulate and come with you in that manner. This is why, again, even if they don't make a choice, they've still made a choice. And that's so important, to keep your wits about yourself, not to get locked down in a fear-based trap, and get yourself through this with your sanity intact, and you will be fine. That's all it takes. In terms of any kind of ritualized structure of it, I have been deliberately projecting myself beyond all this. So I've made a roadmap to what I will achieve after it ends. Then using a combination of my dream oracles, I keep very good track of my dreams. All of the oracles and all of the divination I've done in terms of tarot told me that we protect our psychic space and our psychic defenses from outside intrusion. Therefore, when we get through the other side, we can be ignited.
Right.
You said, a lovely expression you used. That's really all it is. It takes fortitude.
Right. So going back to the ignition of that soul spark essence, this connects us to grid works of consciousness that are beyond all of this. And as far as I'm concerned, I hope is experienced with individuals, because once it does, then you have that navigation, and there's all these different sound steps in terms of frequencies of consciousness and integration, and you don't get caught in all the nets, traps, and snares, and the fear and the triggering and the projections. Because see, when that power, the true power to this ignition happens, this is what these inverted forces fear more than anything, because it routes it the fuck out.
Their power force is useless. We'll be running on AC and they'll still be DC. As much as it hurts, as confusing as it is, as painful as it is, hope that one day they turn back on the same frequency again. We've been talking about this in different forms tonight. It reminded me of something. Have you ever played with a Rubik's Cube? And you say, I'll never solve this, right? Then suddenly, when you're messing with it, a point comes where you're able to find a series of matching. It seems impossible till you get to that point. Suddenly, it makes the puzzle solvable from that point on. Your psychic development is the same. However, it comes with a price. Your own consciousness is like that Rubik's Cube. And then suddenly you click, like you might say, you've used mathematical analogies a lot. But at the same time, too, pathological psychic forces notice and they go, shit, this guy's figuring it out. And that's when the negative energies come to get you, to try and prevent you from fully solving the puzzle. That's a good analogy for what fellas and women like us are going through right now to the other side.
As men and women of consciousness, even beyond the mythos, there's so much more beyond it, Thomas.
Yep.
And not to get pigeonholed into any sort of religious concepts with it, where it's just a fucking sliver. As far as what's been revealed to me, it goes to something that's never been done before since what happened did. It's such an amazing time to be alive in the face.
Absolutely, yes. We're on an adventure. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so important.
Right.
We are gifted to have this challenge placed before us.
And it's to recognize the opportunity of why we actually incarnated to the fucking procession. Yep. This is a major thing that we knew we would, quote unquote, be getting into, right? But if it's been revealed to you and you're someone that knows the fucking difference, not to cave in to fear and all this algorithmic, inverted Saturnian fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
And embracing that Platonian energy to the erosion of all these old constructs, healing waters through the seventh gate in Libra. That's where the wisdom of the magicians of the elements are revealed, from the 8th gate all the way up to 12th.
Right.
And so all of that energy in terms of our magics, even if people have disposition with this has been challenged. divide and conquer energies, as far as I'm concerned, going back to what has triangulated things in terms of grid works from the 6th dimension, bleeding through into the 3rd dimension, going back to Jormungandr, Tesseract, Ouroboros, and all this false ascension timeline crap where we're all going to the 4th dimension or we're all going to the 5th dimension, and they have no idea what the fuck is laced out in terms of that triangulation. And the manipulation of the psychic field, like you're talking about,
they don't want to accept that the difficulty and the dark side is part of that challenge. And this is why they'll never do it, because they won't acknowledge the shadow of it all. When the elves left Middle-earth for the Grey Havens, it was because their magic didn't work on Middle-earth anymore. And therefore they moved to the Undying Lands. And that's what's happening to people who are like the elves in that situation. The ones who are still taught into traditional ritual, hard specifics, hard ceremonial magic, hard ceremonial spiritual working, they're working with a software system that's not compatible with the new hardware.
Right.
And at the moment, those of us who are trying to find our way are trying to develop the means to pass through. And there's an element of choice. We're back to this. There's one theme for tonight's show. It's the whole thing of choice. In Lord of the Rings, when Elrond handstrided Isildur's sword that's been repaired and said it's time to cast off the ranger and become the king you are meant to be.
This all goes back to identity. What we're dealing with here is an identity crisis. Who are you?
Really, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. What is your karma? What are you meant to be?
The Rangers were masters of the wilderness, right? And I
Yep.
think that's maybe part of the rites of initiation to actually become pharaoh or king, and not in some inverted patriarch or matriarchal way.
Yeah.
The true nobility, the ones that hold the actual
That's
codes.
why you had this concept that in the ancient world that the one who was going to become king would have to live as a peasant among the people for a period of time in order to understand his own people at every level. That's what Strider and the Rangers were, to understand the world beyond, so they could be adequate rather than aristocrats.
So things in terms of identity and all this old timeline bullshit, the shadow, and the clinging on to that assumed identity, that's the identity that was overlaid in terms of the Ranger, so that the true essence of the power of the king would be concealed or held back or assumed that you're not that. And I remember that scene when he's talking to Eowyn,
Yeah.
getting into the whole concept of the ancestors and the whole idea that he has this weakness within his blood because of what happened. False guilt
Yeah.
that whatever happened with the ancestors, it's somehow our fault, but really it's the ancestors going, this is what needs to be revealed beyond this.
The correction.
Right. So who you truly are, once it starts to reveal itself, all that fear energy and the rise of the fucking orcs from the lands of Mordor, this is what comes to stop that.
Yep.
So what we're actually dealing with here, I would say, in terms of the procession, is a massive fucking identity crisis.
I think that's a very good way of putting it. And that way it's easy for them to hide behind their mask.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to show their full selves.
Right.
And just like the Abrahamic religions lock people behind veils,
Right. It's the muzzling. It's
the same force trying to prevent the ignition. That was spellcast, and the only way through it, maintaining yourself through accepting the dangers as well as the glory, as well as the successes, as all being equally valuable. It hurts, people in the era of modern technology, they can't trust it with their feelings anymore because they're not fully who they're supposed to be.
How do you mean, man?
So much outside interference upon people's consciousness, culture, media, mass media, news, entertainment. Every waking moment of their lives is a non-stop compromise. And when something comes along that challenges that, they will lash out against it. But it won't be a real feeling of revulsion. It's fear. Again, we're back to fear, that you're going to damage their safe space that they've created for themselves.
Things in terms has to be seen for what it is, because it's not one another.
It's an outside force, absolutely.
I like what you were talking about in terms of the Alfarian Codex. It's quite like that.
Yeah.
Like, we're standing at the edge of the precipice. Gates are open. What a time to be alive. Being able to see it all for what it is and catching it, that's the key, yeah?
Have you also noticed a familiarity about this period? I feel sometimes I've experienced this before in a past life, and I've spoken to a few people who said they have the same feeling too. Like, we've been here before. Yeah.
To assumed identity and assumptions, we have to see the hour we are in for what it actually is, and that's the Alfarian Codex activating it.
In a lot of my own magical vernacular, I use the term attenuational, which means the trimming or narrowing of frequencies down to the specifics you actually need. Focus. And there will be forces trying to pull us into identity crisis, like you said. The important thing is to attenuate our psychic energy into a stream of integrated psychic self, knowing that this is the path and this is now. This the true blade of the North, the Ace of Swords, which strikes the stone and creates the ignition.
And where did all of humanity hail from? The Great North.
The Magyars and the Hungarians, the same thing. Everyone came from the North.
So all this discrepancy, this is why.
Yep.
And so recognizing that, it's like, okay, these are the actual forces been working to destroy mankind. Getting all of us to turn on one another. You know what it's like in network, man.
Yep.
Now's the time. Now's the opportunity. I remember going through initiation before, and there was nothing anybody could do.
Nope.
Literally nobody. And I had to write out what's happening with me. And it can manifest with individuals in many different ways, depending on their actual disposition. So being pressed up against all of this inverted Saturnian energies, if you look at Kabbalah, let's go to the Ari tree real quick, the pillar of severity, the feminine force. At the very top with Binah, that's Saturn. I just don't know how else to see this time that we are in it. They fear the power of the divine feminine force.
The opportunity to escape psychic, spiritual identity crisis. You couldn't say it any more clearly. To get to the other side, and the kit that you need is knowing who you are.
Right. So things in terms of initiation and what I've been able to create, giving people those tools to actually discover that. And I've been working with this stuff for years. And this is a part of the major reason why I'm able to extract and see things. And you, on the level that you're at, are able to verify these things in terms. I appreciate your work, Thomas. And
hold fast to that which is true.
Awesome, man.
Have you seen my Jack Parsons film yet?
Buzz it up.
Yeah, check it out.
Is there anything else you want to plug, man?
No, just the Jack Parsons film, Liber Velocity. That's all I really got going at the moment. And for the gates to open again, it's done.
Just seeing the opportunity for what is meant to happen. All right, Thomas.
Okay, brother. I'll see you. Thank you very much again. Take care.
Bye.
And we'll do this again another time.
And so to the procession and everything else, you heard it straight from Thomas Sheridan himself. Things in terms of confirmation. Everybody out there, definitely check out the rest of what Thomas has presented over the years. It's a lot. And in terms, again, with things on my end, initiation into the mystery school, the doors are open for anybody that has not taken the steps in order to obtain the proper knowledge and wisdom in order to come to know thyself. But I do not assume to have all of the answers. In terms of what I do know, though, the power of ignition that actually takes place, again, what we touched upon in this segment, is one of the absolute most vital experiences that individuals could ever have happen. All of the knowledge in the world isn't going to get you there, and all of the assumptions otherwise, in terms of mechanics and how things actually work, need the right power source in order for the codex to activate correctly. I will not allow myself or anyone that I know in things of terms happening on a multi-dimensional level to be pulled into the goddamn fucking abyss. Yes, I hold position as a way shower, but also a standing, taking on a lot of hits as I have over the years. And looking back at my life and trajectory, I still stand in the position as I always have. And I'm not going to quit up again. The doors are open. This is Seth Esposa, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame Healing Arts and Occult Science. Be empowered, be encouraged. Send this out, let everyone know the message that was spoken specifically in this segment. If you want to line things up for the initiation, send me an email at blackearthproductions@hotmail.com. More is coming. Things are being developed. There's going to be strikes coming out that are going to set things back.